Hyun wiped the dust from another old file box. The archives underneath New Seoul Station stretched for miles in every direction. Row after row of forgotten documents filled the endless halls. Most people never came down here. Most people had. No reason to dig through 300 years of old war records. But Hyun loved finding lost stories. As the head archivist, he spent his days organizing the mess that centuries of bureaucrats had left behind. Today felt different, though. Today he had found something strange. The file in his hands had no proper label. Someone had scratched out the original writing so hard that the metal plate was gouged. All that remained were numbers and a single word: sealed. Hyun had been doing this job for 15 years. He had never seen a file sealed like this one. The lock mechanism was ancient. It required 3 different keys and a biometric scan. That level of security was reserved for the most dangerous information: wars that could start again, weapons that could destroy planets, secrets that could topple governments. His curiosity got the better of him. Hyun spent 2 hours tracking down the right keys. The biometric scanner was so old that it took 6 tries to get it working. When the file finally opened, he expected something dramatic. Maybe plans for a superweapon. Maybe evidence of some political scandal. Instead, he found fragments, pieces of reports with sections blacked out, half-destroyed video files that wouldn't play, communication logs with entire conversations missing. Everything pointed to a war that had happened about 300 years ago, but the enemy was never named. Every reference had been carefully removed. The strangest thing was how the reports were written. Usually military files were cold and factual. These were different. The officers writing them sounded angry. Not just angry, furious beyond reason. Some of the reports had coffee stains and burn marks, as if people had thrown them down in rage. One fragment caught his attention. It was from Admiral Someone. The name had been scratched out. The date showed it was from the final days of whatever this war had been. Most of the text was gone, but a few lines remained clear. They have crossed a line that cannot be uncrossed. Every principle we hold dear demands we show mercy. But mercy is a luxury we can no longer afford. What they did to those children, God forgive us for what we must do now. Hyun sat back in his chair. Children? What had happened to children? He dug deeper into the fragments, looking for more clues. Another piece of paper had a single sentence that made his blood run cold. Confirmed. 200,000 human children taken from the colonies. Purpose unknown. None recovered alive. The next document was even worse. Someone had handwritten a note in the margin. They're not just killing them. They're using them for something. The screaming never stops. Hyun's hands were shaking now. What kind of enemy had humanity faced? What had they done that was so terrible that even mentioning their name became forbidden? He called Captain Dae-ho. The two had been friends since university, and Dae-ho commanded one of the research ships that explored old battlefields. If anyone could help him make sense of this, it would be Dae-ho. You found what? Dae-ho's voice crackled through the communication system. A war that isn't supposed to exist, Hyun said. Someone went to incredible lengths to hide it. I'm talking about files that have been locked away for 3 centuries. And Dae-ho, whatever happened, involved children. Lots of them. There was a long pause. Send me everything you have. I'm bringing my ship to New Seoul Station. And Hyun, don't tell anyone else about this yet. While waiting for Dae-ho to arrive, Hyun continued searching. He found references scattered across dozens of different files. Always fragments, always pieces. Someone had been very thorough about erasing this war from history, but they hadn't been perfect. In a file about medical supplies, he found a requisition for trauma counseling services for returning veterans of the Forgotten Campaign. In a shipping manifest, someone had listed memorial materials for the war that must not be named. The most disturbing find was a psychological evaluation of a soldier named Jin Woo. Most of the report was destroyed, but one paragraph survived. Patient shows severe post-traumatic stress following Operation Silent Grave. Recommended for memory modification therapy. Patient has requested complete erasure of all memories related to the redacted conflict. Quote, I don't want to remember what we became. I don't want to remember what we had to do to things that looked almost human. Things that looked almost human? Hyun felt sick. What kind of creatures had humanity fought? Captain Daeho arrived the next morning with his science officer, Sora. She was a xenobiologist who specialized in studying dead alien civilizations. Together, the three of them spread out all the fragments that Hyun had found. This is systematic destruction of information, Sora said, examining the damaged files. Someone didn't just want to classify this war. They wanted to erase it completely. Daeho was studying a star chart that had been heavily modified. Look at this. These three star systems have been completely redrawn. The original coordinates have been painted over with new ones. It's like someone wanted to pretend these places never existed. Or like something so terrible happened there that they couldn't bear to remember, Hyun added. Sora found something else. In the corner of one damaged report, someone had written a few words in Old Korean. Gudulin idol manjota. They touched the children, she translated, her voice barely above a whisper. The three friends looked at each other. Whatever this war had been, it involved an enemy that had done something unspeakable to human children, and humanity's response had been so extreme that they had chosen to forget it entirely. We need to find out more, Daeho said finally. If someone buried this so deep, there might be a good reason. But we also need to know what we're capable of when pushed too far. Hyun nodded. There are more sealed archives, deeper ones, files that require even higher clearance. Then that's where we go next, Sora said. We need to know the truth, even if it's a truth that someone decided we shouldn't remember. As they packed up the fragments, Hyun couldn't shake the feeling that they were opening a door that had been locked for good reason. But some doors, once discovered, demanded to be opened. Some truths, no matter how terrible, needed to be known. The next morning, they would begin their journey into humanity's darkest secret. They would learn why. An entire species had been erased, not just from the galaxy, but from memory itself. The Crimson Vaults on Titan were the kind of place that made even hardened soldiers nervous. Built deep inside the moon's ice, they housed the most dangerous secrets in human space, information so terrible that it was locked away from everyone, including most government officials. Daeho's ship docked at the research facility 3 days after leaving New Seoul Station. Security Chief Minho was waiting for them at the airlock. He was a big man with scars on his hands and a reputation for being impossible to intimidate. But today he looked worried. You're here about the forgotten war, Minho said. It wasn't a question. Hyun was surprised. You know about it? I know enough to know that some doors should stay closed, Minho replied. But I also know that you three won't give up until you find the truth. And maybe it's time. Minho led them through layers of security that got more intense at each level. Biometric scanners, DNA analysis, psychological evaluation computers that could detect lies. The deepest vault required all four of them to place their hands on different scanners at the same time. The Crimson Vaults have been sealed for 312 years, Minho explained as the massive door slowly opened. Only 7 people in all of human space have the clearance to enter. You're about to become 4 of them. The vault was smaller than Hyun had expected, just a single room with walls covered in storage units. But each unit was labeled with warnings that made his blood run cold. Psychological hazard. Memetic contamination risk. Viewer discretion severely advised. In the center of the room was a single computer terminal, ancient by modern standards but still functional. Minho activated it with his personal codes. What "You're about to see broke the minds of some very tough people," he warned them. Admiral Tae-jun recorded these files in the final days of the war. He was ordered to destroy them but couldn't bring himself to do it. He said future generations might need to understand what we were capable of. The screen flickered to life. Admiral Tae-jun appeared, looking exhausted and much older than his 43 years. His uniform was dirty and torn. His eyes had the hollow look of someone who had seen too much. Personal log, Admiral Tae-jun, day 2047 of the war, his recorded voice began. "I don't know if anyone will ever see this. I don't know if anyone should, but someone needs to remember. Someone needs to know what the Veltar did to us, and what we became in response." Sora grabbed Hyeon's arm. "Veltar," she whispered. "That's the first time we've heard their actual name." The recording continued. The Veltar called themselves Soul Weavers. They believed that consciousness was just another resource to be harvested. They had been doing it for thousands of years to their own people. But they discovered something about human children. Our consciousness burns brighter, they said. Lasts longer, tastes better. Tae-jun's voice broke slightly. They would take children as young as 5 years old. They had machines that could keep a child's brain alive while they slowly consumed their memories, their personality, their very sense of self. The process took weeks. The children remained conscious the entire time. Hyeon felt sick. He wanted to turn off the recording, but he forced himself to keep watching. The Veltar discovered that fear made the consciousness stronger, so they would show the children what was happening to others before their turn came. They would make them watch. They called it seasoning the harvest. Daeho was clenching his fists so hard that his knuckles were white. "How many?" he asked. The screen, even though he knew Tae-jun couldn't hear him, as if answering, Tae-jun continued. "Final count. 215 million human children across 47 worlds. They didn't just take them randomly. They studied our colony reports and specifically targeted the worlds with the most children. They wanted to harvest an entire generation." The screen showed a map of human space. Red dots marked the worlds that had been attacked. There were so many red dots that the map looked like it was covered in blood. The Veltar had been planning something they called the Great Harvest, Tae-jun's recording went on. Earth was going to be the final target. 3 billion children, they estimated, enough to make their entire species immortal. Minho paused the recording. "This is where it gets really bad," he said quietly. "Worse than what we just saw?" Sora asked. "What we just saw explains what they did to us," Minho replied. "What comes next explains what we did to them." He restarted the recording. Admiral Tae-jun looked directly into the camera, and his expression was no longer sad. Now he looked angry, furious beyond reason. Humanity's response began with Operation Silent Grave. General Wansik developed a strategy that violated every rule of war we had ever written. We would not just defeat the Veltar, we would erase them. Completely. The screen showed battle footage. Human ships attacking Veltar positions with weapons that seemed designed to cause maximum suffering. The Veltar ships didn't just explode. They seemed to dissolve piece by piece. "We developed new weapons specifically for this war," Tae-jun explained. "Weapons that caused pain before death. We wanted them to suffer like they had made our children suffer. We became the monsters we were fighting." Sora was crying now. "This isn't human," she whispered. "It is human," Minho corrected her. "This is what we become when you hurt our children. This is why the galaxy fears us." The recording showed more footage. Veltar prisoners being interrogated with methods that made Hyeon look away. Human soldiers who had stopped thinking of their enemies as living beings. "The worst part wasn't the killing," Tae-jun said. "It was how good we became at it, how quickly we learned to enjoy it. I watched soldiers who had been poets and teachers turn into creatures that could torture information out of Veltar captives without blinking. The Admiral paused, taking a drink of something from a metal cup. By the end, we weren't fighting a war. We were conducting an extermination. And when we were done, we made a decision. We would not just win. We would make sure the Veltar never existed in any way that mattered. Taejun's final words were spoken directly to the camera, as if he was talking to whoever would eventually watch this recording. We used quantum weapons to destroy not just their worlds, but the very information that proved they had ever existed. We scrubbed their name from every database, every historical record, every mention in every alien civilization we could find. We turned their entire species into a ghost story that no one remembered. The recording ended. The four friends sat in silence for several minutes. Finally, Hyon spoke. They deserved it. Yes, Minho agreed, but that doesn't make what we became any less terrible. We chose to become monsters to fight monsters, and we were very, very good at it. Daeho stood up and began pacing. So why keep these records at all? Why not destroy everything? Because, Sora said quietly, someone needs to remember what we're capable of, both the good and the evil. Someone needs to know that if you push humanity far enough, we will cross any line to protect our children. Minho nodded. That's exactly what Admiral Taejun believed. These recordings are a warning to us and to anyone else who might think about making the same mistake the Veltar made. But as they prepared to leave the Crimson Vaults, none of them realized that their investigation had triggered something. Deep in space, an ancient signal had been activated. Something that had been waiting for 3 centuries was finally waking up. The last Veltar ship was stirring from its long sleep. And it was very, very angry. The journey to the Kepler 442 system took 8 days through hyperspace. During the trip, pilot Jun Ki kept checking his navigation equipment. The star charts for this region had been redrawn so many times that it was hard to tell what was real and what was false information. According to official records, this system has 3 dead planets and nothing else, Jun Ki reported to the others. But my sensors are picking up debris fields that stretch for millions of miles. Whatever happened, here was massive. When they finally arrived, the sight took their breath away. Space itself seemed broken. Instead of the empty system they expected, they found a graveyard that defied imagination. Chunks of metal and crystal drifted in perfect formations, as if entire worlds had been carefully taken apart piece by piece. These aren't natural asteroid fields, Sora observed, studying the readings. Look at the composition. This debris contains materials that could only come from constructed habitats, cities, ships, entire civilizations. Daeho was running deep, scans on the larger fragments. The metal here has been exposed to weapons I don't recognize, something that didn't just destroy these structures, it broke them down at the molecular level. Like someone wanted to make sure they could never be rebuilt. They spent 2 days mapping the debris fields. The more they explored, the more horrifying the picture became. This hadn't been a battle. It had been a systematic dismantling of everything the Veltar had ever built. On the 3rd day, Jun Ki's sensors detected something unusual. Hidden in the shadow of a large asteroid was a structure that didn't match the surrounding debris. It was human-made, and it was still active. Research Station Omega-7, Daeho read from his computer. According to these records, it was abandoned 300 years ago, but someone's been maintaining it. They docked carefully. The station's airlocks were functional and life support was running normally. Someone had been living here for a very long time. Dr. Yunji met them at the inner airlock. She looked impossibly old, but her eyes were sharp and alert. Life extension treatments had kept her alive far beyond normal human lifespan. She had been waiting here for 3 centuries, studying the ruins of the Veltar civilization. You're the ones who accessed the Crimson Vaults, she said. It wasn't a question. I've been monitoring Terran communication networks. I knew someone would eventually come looking for answers. Her station was part laboratory and part museum. The walls were covered with displays showing Veltar artifacts, technology, and biological samples. But everything was broken, destroyed. Nothing remained intact. I was part of the final assault, Dr. Yunji explained as she led them through her collection. My job was to study the enemy, to understand how they had become such perfect monsters. What I found was worse than anything in the official reports. She stopped in front of a display case containing what looked like a child's toy, a small stuffed animal, burned and torn. This belonged to a 7-year-old girl named Eugene from the colony on Kepler 438b. The Veltar took her in the first wave of attacks. We found this toy in their primary harvesting facility, along with toys from 200,000 other children. Haiyan stared at the toy. It made everything suddenly real. These weren't just numbers in a report. Each one had been a real child with parents who loved them. The Veltar weren't just evil, Dr. Yunji continued. They were efficient. They had turned the harvesting of consciousness into an industrial process. Entire ships designed for nothing but processing children. Machines that could keep a young brain alive for months while they slowly consumed everything that made them human. She led them to another display. This one showed technical diagrams of Veltar harvesting equipment. The machines looked like twisted medical devices, designed to cause maximum psychological trauma while keeping the victim alive and conscious. They discovered that human children between the ages of 5 and 12 produced the strongest consciousness, patterns. Something about the way our minds develop made us perfect for their purposes. They called human children Golden Harvest, the most valuable consciousness in the galaxy. Sora was studying the technical diagrams with a horrified expression. These machines, they're designed to maximize fear and pain. The Veltar weren't just harvesting consciousness. They were torturing children to make their consciousness stronger. Exactly, Dr. Yunji confirmed. They had learned that terror improved the flavor, they said, so they would show each child what had happened to the others. They would make them watch the harvesting process before their own turn came. Deho had moved to another display. This one showed star charts of Veltar space at the height of their power. Hundreds of worlds, billions of beings, a civilization that had dominated this entire region of the galaxy. How did humanity manage to destroy all of this? He asked. Dr. Yunji smiled, but it wasn't a happy expression. By becoming something worse than they were. The Veltar made one critical mistake. They assumed that because humans seemed peaceful, we were weak. They didn't understand that our capacity for violence is directly proportional to how much we love what is being threatened. She activated a holographic display showing the final stages of the war. Human fleets that had grown larger than anything ever seen before. Weapons that seemed designed purely for causing suffering rather than quick death. General Wansik's strategy was brilliant and terrible. He realized that simply killing the Veltar wasn't enough. They had to be punished. They had to suffer exactly what they had made our children suffer. The hologram showed human soldiers in battles that looked more like hunting expeditions. The Veltar were being systematically tracked down and eliminated, but not quickly. The process was designed to take time, to cause pain. We didn't just fight them, Dr. Yunji explained. We terrorized them. We made them experience the same fear they had inflicted on human children. We turned their own psychology against them. Junki was studying readouts from the station's long-range sensors. Dr. Yunji, have you been monitoring the outer system? My equipment is showing some kind of energy signature near the edge of Veltar space. The old scientist froze. She quickly moved to her main computer and began running scans. That's impossible, she whispered. I've been monitoring this entire region for 300 years. There's nothing out there but dead space. But the readings were clear. Something was moving in the outer darkness. Something large and old and very much alive. The Veltar kept survival ships, Dr. Yunji said, her voice filled with sudden fear. Deep space vessels designed to hide for centuries if necessary. I thought we had found them all. The energy signature was getting stronger. Whatever was out there was waking up and heading toward the inner system. It's been monitoring our communications, Sora realized. Our investigation triggered some kind of automatic response. We've been broadcasting human signals in Veltar space for the first time in 3 centuries. Dr. Yunji was already activating the station's emergency protocols. If there's a Veltar ship out there, it won't be coming to talk. After what we did to their species, any survivor would be focused on one thing: revenge. Alarms began sounding throughout the station. Jun Ki was at the communication console, trying to contact their ship. But the readings were clear. Whatever was approaching was jamming all signals to the outside. How many survivors could be on a ship like that? Daeho asked. Dr. Yunji checked her historical records. Veltar survival ships were designed for long-term hibernation. Maybe 50 to 100 individuals. But that's not what you should be worried about. What do you mean? The Veltar were masters of consciousness manipulation. If there's been a survivor ship hiding out here for 3 centuries, feeding on the consciousness of its own crew members to stay alive, what's left won't be Veltar anymore. It will be something much worse. The lights flickered as something large passed between the station and the local star. Through the viewport, they could see a ship that looked more grown than built. Organic curves mixed with mechanical components in ways that hurt to look at directly. And somewhere inside that ship, something that had once been Veltar was very angry. It had been waiting 300 years for the chance to make humans suffer, the way their species had suffered. The hunt was about to begin again. The alien ship hung motionless in space for 3 hours before it finally sent a message. When it came, the transmission nearly drove everyone on the station insane. It wasn't just sound or video. The message attacked their minds directly, filling their heads with images of screaming children and memories that weren't their own. Dr. Yunji activated the station's mental shielding just in time to prevent permanent damage. "I am Kethvar," the voice said when the psychic assault finally stopped. "Last child of the Soul Weavers, last memory of the Golden Harvest. I have waited in the cold dark while my people's screams echoed across the void. And now I will show you what your species taught mine about suffering." The transmission ended, leaving the 5 humans shaking and terrified. But Dr. Yunji was already moving, pulling up files from her deepest archives. "I need to show you something," she said, her voice grim. "You need to understand exactly what humanity did during the Purge protocols, because that creature out there lived through it." She activated a holographic display that filled the entire laboratory. What appeared was a 3-dimensional map of the galaxy as it had existed 300 years ago. Entire sectors were marked, in different colors showing the progression of humanity's campaign against the Veltar. "The war lasted 7 years, Dr. Yunji began. But the actual fighting was over in the first 2 years. Everything after that was the Purge. Commander Sung Min developed the protocols that turned our military from a defense force into an extermination machine. The hologram showed human fleets moving through Veltar space in carefully planned waves. But these weren't random attacks. Every movement was calculated to cause maximum psychological damage to the surviving Veltar populations. Sung Min realized that the Veltar understood fear better than any species in the galaxy. They had perfected the art of terrorizing their victims, so he decided to use their own methods against them. The display zoomed in on a Veltar world during the final stages of the war. Human ships surrounded the planet, but they weren't attacking immediately. Instead, they were broadcasting. Phase 1 of the Purge was psychological warfare, Dr. Yunji explained. For weeks before each attack, we would transmit recordings of Veltar screams from the worlds we had already conquered. We wanted them to know what was coming. We wanted them to be afraid. Sora was staring at the display with horror. That's exactly what they did to human children. Made them watch what would happen before their turn came. Yes, Commander Sungmin was very clear about that. He said we would use their own methods to make them feel what our children had felt. The hologram shifted to show the actual attacks. Human soldiers were using weapons that seemed designed to cause pain rather than quick death. Veltar prisoners were being subjected to procedures that looked disturbingly similar to their own harvesting techniques. Phase 2 was the harvest reversal, Dr. Yoonji continued. Engineer Yoon-ah had studied the Veltar consciousness extraction machines. She developed ways to use them in reverse. Instead of harvesting consciousness, we were forcing traumatic memories into Veltar minds. Hyon felt sick. We were torturing them with their own technology. Worse than that, we were making each Veltar experience the death of every human child they had killed. We forced them to live through 200 million individual murders from the victim's perspective. The hologram showed Veltar beings connected to modified versions of their own machines. Their bodies were convulsing as their minds were flooded with the memories of their victims. Many went insane within hours, Dr. Yoonji said quietly. But we kept them alive, kept them conscious. We wanted them to experience every single death they had caused. Daeho was pacing back and forth, his fists clenched. They deserved it. After what they did to children, they deserved everything we did to them. Maybe they did, Dr. Yoonji agreed. But look what it cost us. The hologram changed to show human soldiers during the later stages of the war. Their faces had changed. The compassion and mercy that had once defined humanity was gone. In its place was something cold and efficient and terrible. Phase 3 was the erasure, Dr. Yoonji continued. Physicist Chan Wu developed quantum weapons that didn't just destroy matter. They unraveled the information patterns that proved something had ever existed. The display showed entire Veltar worlds being hit by weapons that made them simply disappear. Not explode, not shatter, just cease to exist as if they had never been there at all. But even that wasn't enough for General Wansik. He wanted to make sure that no trace of the Veltar would ever be found, so he ordered Phase 4, the Memory Purge. New images appeared showing human technicians working on massive computer systems. They were systematically going through every database, every historical record, every mention of the Veltar in every alien civilization they could find. We didn't just kill them, Dr. Yoonji said. We erased them from history. We deleted their existence from the collective memory of the galaxy. Chan Wu's team even developed technology to alter the memories of captured aliens who had knowledge of the Veltar. Junki was monitoring the approaching ship on his instruments. It's getting closer, and it's broadcasting something on all frequencies. Dr. Yoonji activated the communication system, but kept the mental shielding in place. Kethvar's voice filled the station again, but this time it was different, sadder, more human somehow. You want to know what your purge accomplished? The voice asked. I will tell you, I am the last of my people, not because I hid better than the others. I am the last because I consumed them all. The humans looked at each other in horror. When your fleets came to our final world, I was young, barely past my first molting. I watched your soldiers kill my parents with weapons designed to make death slow and painful. I watched them feed the memories of human children into my siblings' minds until they went insane. The transmission paused. When Kethvar spoke again, his voice was filled with a rage that had been building for 3 centuries. So I learned from you. When the food ran out on our survival ship, I did what you taught me to do. I harvested my own people. I consumed their consciousness to keep myself alive. I became the monster you said we were. Dr. Yoonji was checking her computer records frantically. If he's been feeding on other Veltar for 300 years, absorbing their consciousness and memories, he's not just one being anymore. He's thousands of minds trapped in a single body. And now I have found humans again, Kethvar continued. I have found the children of the species that taught my people the true meaning of fear. And I am going to show you exactly what you taught us. The alien ship began to move closer to the station. As it approached, They could see that it wasn't just a ship anymore. It had been modified, grown, twisted into something that looked more like a living creature than a machine. He's turned his ship into a harvesting facility, Sora realized. He's planning to do to us what his people did to human children. But there's something else, Dr. Unji said, studying the readings from her sensors. That ship is broadcasting into hyperspace. He's not just here for revenge. He's recording everything. He wants the galaxy to know what humans are capable of when we're pushed too far. The lights flickered as the alien ship extended some kind of docking mechanism toward their station. Somewhere in the depths of that twisted vessel, machines that had been built to torture children were powering up again. And Kethavar was no longer the young Veltar who had hidden from humanity's wrath. He had become something new. Something that had learned how to hate with the same intensity that humans had shown when their children were threatened. The last lesson of the Purge protocols was about to begin. The alien ship attached itself to Dr. Yunji's station with organic tendrils that looked disturbingly like blood vessels. Through the viewports, the humans could see the hull of Kethavar's vessel pulsing as if it were alive. He's not just docking, Sora observed with growing horror. He's merging his ship with the station. We're being absorbed. Dr. Yunji was frantically trying to activate the station's separation protocols, but nothing was working. The organic components are interfacing with our computer systems. He's taking control of everything. Combat specialist Dong Wook had joined them from their ship just before the docking. He was checking his weapons, but his face showed doubt. How do you fight something that's part machine and part living tissue? You don't, Dr. Yunji said grimly. You survive long enough to understand what it wants. The lights suddenly changed from normal white to a sickly green color. The air itself seemed to thicken, carrying scents that reminded them of medical facilities and decay. Through the station's communication system, Kethavar's voice echoed with amusement. Are you afraid? He asked. Good. Fear seasons the consciousness nicely. My people learned that from studying your children. Doors throughout. The station began opening and closing on their own. The computer displays flickered between normal readouts and images that hurt to look at directly. Kethavar was playing with them, demonstrating his control over their environment. I want to show you something, the alien voice continued. Something your history books don't mention. The main display screen activated, showing the interior of what looked like a vast cargo hold. But as the image became clearer, they realized they were looking at a nursery. Hundreds of small beds arranged in neat rows, and in each bed was a human child. Hyun felt his legs go weak. That's impossible. Those children would be 300 years old. Time moves differently in stasis, Kethavar explained. I have kept them preserved exactly as they were on the day I found them. The last harvest from the final Veltar world your people destroyed. The children looked exactly as they would have 3 centuries ago. Boys and girls between the ages of 5 and 12, sleeping peacefully in their beds. They seemed unaware of the horror around them. How many? Daeho asked, his voice barely a whisper. 3,217, Kethavar replied. The exact number of my people that your General Wonsik executed in the final assault. I thought the symmetry was appropriate. Sora was studying the images with her scientific training, trying to understand what she was seeing. The life support systems around those children are incredibly advanced. He's not just keeping them alive. He's keeping them exactly as they were. No aging, no growth, no change. I have been feeding on their dreams for 3 centuries, Kethavar continued. Not enough to wake them, just enough to sustain myself. They dream of home, of parents who have been dead for 300 years. Their fear and sadness has kept me alive, while I waited for more humans to find me. Dong Wook had been checking the schematics of the station, looking for ways to fight. Back, The organic components of his ship are spreading through our systems like a virus. In another hour, he'll have complete control over everything, including life support. That's the point, Dr. Yunji said. He doesn't want to kill us quickly. He wants us to understand what we did to his people. The display changed to show recordings from the Veltar homeworld during the final assault. Human soldiers were herding Veltar civilians into large buildings. The aliens looked terrified, many of them holding children of their own. "This is what your people did to mine," Kethvar's voice narrated over the images. "They separated the adults from the children. Then they used our own harvesting machines on both groups." The recordings showed human soldiers operating Veltar consciousness extraction equipment, but they had modified the machines to work in reverse, forcing traumatic memories into Veltar minds instead of extracting consciousness from them. "Commander Sungmin called it justice," Kethvar continued, "making us experience every death we had caused. But what he didn't understand was that Veltar consciousness works differently than human consciousness. We don't just experience memories, we absorb them. They become part of us." Hyun was beginning to understand. The torture didn't just hurt them, it changed them. Exactly. Every human death we were forced to experience became part of our own memories. By the time your people were finished with us, we had absorbed the consciousness patterns of 200 million human children. We had become partially human ourselves. The implications were staggering. The purge protocols hadn't just tortured the Veltar. They had accidentally created a hybrid consciousness that was part human and part alien. "That's how I learned to hate the way humans hate," Kethvar explained. "Through the memories of your own children. I felt their love for their parents, their trust in adults, their belief that someone would save them. And then I felt that love and trust being betrayed." The station shuddered as more organic components spread through its structure. Through the walls, they could see pulsing vessels carrying some kind of fluid between the alien ship and their human systems. "You're not just taking control of our station," Sora realized. "You're trying to merge us with your ship the same way you merged with those human children's consciousness." "Very good," Kethvar praised her. "I am going to make you part of me, just as your children became part of me. You will experience every moment of fear and pain that I have felt for 3 centuries. Dongwook raised his weapon, but Dr. Yunji stopped him. "Projectile weapons won't work against something that's part organic, and if we damage the wrong system, we might hurt those children." "The children are why you won't fight," Kethvar observed. "Even now, knowing what I plan to do to you, your first concern is protecting them. It's exactly what made human children so valuable to my people. Your capacity for love makes your consciousness burn brighter." The display showed more footage from the war. This time it was recordings of human soldiers after months of fighting the Veltar. Their faces had changed. The compassion and mercy that had once defined humanity was gone, replaced by something cold and efficient. "Your people became monsters to fight monsters," Kethvar said, "but they never stopped being human. That's what made them so terrible. They knew what they were doing was wrong, and they did it anyway." Jun-Ki was monitoring their ship's systems from a portable console. "The organic growth is spreading to our vessel, too. In 30 minutes, we won't be able to leave, even if we wanted to." "We can't leave those children," Daeho said firmly. "Whatever else happens, we can't abandon them to this creature." "Ah," Kethvar's voice carried satisfaction. "You see? Even facing your own destruction, you think first of protecting the young. It's what makes humans both admirable and exploitable." The alien was right. Despite knowing that they were walking into a trap, despite understanding that Kethvar planned to torture them the same way his people had tortured human children, they couldn't bring themselves to abandon those 3,217 sleeping children. It was exactly the kind of moral weakness that the Veltar had learned to exploit, and exactly the kind of strength that made humans dangerous when their children were threatened. The question now was whether their human compassion would be enough to save the children, or whether it would just ensure that everyone died together. The organic growth had spread through most of the station when Kethvar finally revealed himself. The creature that emerged from his ship was no longer recognizably Veltar. 3 centuries of consuming the consciousness of his own people had twisted him into something new, part alien, part machine, and part human child. His body was a grotesque mixture of Veltar biology and mechanical components harvested from the consciousness extraction machines. But his eyes held the innocent confusion of a human child, overlaid with the ancient fury of a species that had been erased from existence. "Do you know what the worst part was?" Kethvar asked, as he approached them through corridors that now pulsed like living tissue. "It wasn't the pain of watching my people die. It wasn't even the loneliness of 3 centuries in the dark. It was becoming human enough to understand what we had done wrong." Dr. Yunji stepped forward, her hands raised in a gesture of peace. "Then you understand why we had to stop you, why humanity couldn't let your people continue harvesting children." "I understand," Kethvar agreed. "But understanding doesn't make the fury go away. I have the memories of 200 million human children inside my mind. I feel their love for parents who couldn't save them. I know what it's like to trust adults who failed to protect me. And I blame humanity for making me capable of feeling that pain." Through the ship's systems, he showed them what he had been doing for the past 3 centuries. Not just surviving on the dreams of the preserved children, but broadcasting humanity's crimes across the galaxy. Every species they had contacted now knew the story of the Purge protocols. Some civilizations were horrified by what you did, Kethvar explained. Others were impressed by your thoroughness, but all of them now understand what happens when humans are pushed too far. You have become the galaxy's cautionary tale. Hyun was studying the broadcast logs. "You've been sending out the story of the war for 300 years? Every day. To every civilization I could reach. I wanted to make sure that humanity's capacity for violence was never forgotten, that no species would ever again make the mistake of underestimating your anger." Sora realized what that meant. "You've been protecting us, warning other species not to threaten human children. Perhaps. Or perhaps I've been ensuring that when other species finally decide to destroy humanity, they'll know to be thorough about it." The station shuddered as more of Kethvar's ship integrated with their systems. Through the viewports, they could see space being filled with a transmission array that stretched for thousands of miles. The alien wasn't just broadcasting to the local system. He was sending signals across the entire galaxy. "Today's transmission is special," Kethvar continued. "Today I'm showing them what happens when humans face the last survivor of the species they tried to erase. Some of them are placing bets on whether your compassion will save you or doom you." Dongwook had been quietly studying the layout of Kethvar's ship through the merged systems. "The children's stasis chambers are heavily protected, but there might be a way to separate them from the ship's main systems. If we could get them to safety." "You would sacrifice yourselves to save children you've never met," Kethvar observed. "Even knowing that I would torture you the way my people tortured them. It's exactly the kind of irrational behavior that made humans impossible to predict during the war." Daeho stepped closer to the alien hybrid. "What do you want, Kethvar? Real revenge? Or just for someone to acknowledge what your people suffered?" The creature paused, considering the question. When he spoke again, his voice carried the confusion of a child overlaid with the wisdom of centuries. "I want my people back. I want the great harvest to have never happened. I want human children to have never suffered, so that I wouldn't have their memories burning in my mind. But none of those things are possible." Dr. Yunji made a decision that surprised everyone, including herself. She walked directly up to Kethvar and placed her hand on his twisted form. "Then let us carry the burden with you," she said. "You've been alone with this pain for 3 centuries. You don't have to bear it by yourself anymore." Through the ship's systems, Kethvar could have killed her instantly. Instead, He allowed the connection. Through the organic interfaces, Dr. Yunji began to experience fragments of what the alien had lived through. The loneliness of watching his species die, the horror of consuming his own people to survive, the gradual acquisition of human memories, and emotions that made him capable of understanding both sides of the war. 300 years of existing as a living reminder of humanity's darkest hour. "I see," Dr. Yunji whispered. "You're not just the last Veltar. You're the memorial to everyone who died in that war, human and alien alike." "Yes. And I'm tired of being a memorial. I'm tired of carrying the memories of children who will never grow up. I'm tired of hating and being hated." Junki was monitoring the galactic transmissions that Kethvar had been sending. "The other species aren't just watching to see what happens to us. They're waiting to see if humanity has learned anything from the war." "What do you mean?" Hyun asked. "If we respond to Kethvar with violence, we prove that we're still the species that conducted the purge protocols. If we find another way, we prove that we can choose mercy even when facing our victims." Sora finished. Kethvar was watching their conversation with growing interest. "You're debating whether to save me along with the children. You're as much a victim of this war as anyone," Daeho said. "What your people did was monstrous. What humanity did in response was also monstrous. But you're not responsible for either of those choices." The alien hybrid laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I have the consciousness of thousands of murdered humans inside my mind. I've been broadcasting humanity's crimes across the galaxy for 3 centuries. I've kept 217 children in stasis to feed on their dreams. How exactly am I a victim?" "Because none of those were choices you made freely," Dr. Yunji said. "You were a child when the war ended. Everything you became after that was shaped by the trauma we inflicted on your people." Through the ship's systems, they began implementing Dongwook's plan to separate the children's stasis chambers. But instead of fighting Kethvar, they included him in the process. They showed him that it was possible to save the children without destroying him. "You're offering me a choice I didn't know I had," Kethvar said as the stasis chambers began separating from his ship's systems. "I can let them go. I can stop being the creature that feeds on children's dreams." "What would you be instead?" Hyun asked. "I don't know. I've been defined by this war for so long that I'm not sure who I am without it." The process took several hours. When it was complete, the preserved children were safely aboard the human research vessel, still sleeping but no longer connected to the alien hybrid's life support systems. Kethvar had changed too. Without the constant input of human consciousness, he seemed smaller, more uncertain, but also more peaceful. "The galaxy is still watching," he said. "What happens next will determine whether humanity is remembered as the species that conducted the purge protocols, or as the species that chose mercy when it had the chance for revenge." Dr. Yunji made a decision that would be debated by historians for centuries to come. "Then we choose mercy, but not silence." She activated the station's communication array and broadcast their story across the galaxy. Not just the crimes of the Veltar, not just the horrors of the purge protocols, but the choice they were making now to break the cycle of vengeance. "Some things should be remembered," she said in her transmission. "The suffering of children should never be forgotten. The price of justice should never be ignored. But some names deserve to be forgotten, and some fury once spent should never be spoken of again." Kethvar listened to her broadcast with something approaching peace in his ancient eyes. "You're choosing to remember the victims instead of the perpetrators, yes. Both human and Veltar. Both the children who died and the species that was erased in response. The alien hybrid made his own choice then. Instead of continuing his broadcasts of hatred and vengeance, he began transmitting a different message, a warning to the galaxy about the dangers of harming children, but also a reminder that mercy was possible even in the darkest circumstances. Years later, when historians studied this encounter, they would debate whether humanity had chosen mercy or found a more sophisticated form of justice. But for the 3,217 children who woke up safely on human worlds, and for the last Veltar who finally found peace after 3 centuries of pain, the distinction didn't matter. Some names deserve to be forgotten. Some fury once spent should never be spoken of again. But the choice to break cycles of vengeance, to show mercy to victims and monsters alike, that choice should be remembered forever. In the end, that was humanity's true strength. Not their capacity for violence when pushed too far, but their ability to choose compassion even when facing the consequences of their own darkness.